Today in the EU Commissioners' guessing game. With EU elections just days away, speculation about the EU Commissioners are growing louder. If the new European Commission President is elected by July, they'll have the summer to form their College of Commissioners from the nominated candidates. But who is staying? Who is going? And what are the new entries? Hello and welcome. I am Evi Kiorri and this is Today in the EU. To understand better what is happening with the EU commissioners, I spoke with our politics editor, Aurélie Pugnet. Hi, Aurélie.
Hi, Evi.
So we know that elections will bring changes to the political leadership of the European Commission with a new cohort of commissioners. What does it take to become a commissioner and how does one secure the job?
It takes a lot to secure the job, more than we think, I think. Mm-hmm. From what we've been seeing over the past few years and a few mandates, the most important thing to remember is that you have to be in a good relationship with your current government. Mm-hmm. Being in a good relationship doesn't necessarily mean being one of their allies or anything like this, but they have to appoint you. So let's say that you're Greek and you absolutely want to be sent to Brussels as an ex-commissioner. Well, you have to have a good relationship with Mitsotakis because he's the prime minister and he probably will send someone that either he trusts, so that could be an ally, or someone maybe that he wants to get rid of on a national scene.
Do we have an example of this?
Last time, I think it was Margrethe Vestager, so the Danish commissioner at the moment, who's very famous because of all the fine that she's imposing on Google's and like all those big companies in the US. She was not at all on the same line politically as the current government that appointed her. So that was a bit of a surprise, but in a way...
But she's doing great. It looks like a win.
Yeah, I think it's she has a lot of experience, and that's why also it's a good look also on the country, isn't it? If you say, oh, the Danish commissioner is that one. At the end, do you really care that they come from this party or this other party? Maybe not.
Not really, especially in her case. But, recently there's been much discussion about the expected shift in focus for the next commission, from green policies to defense. Will this be reflected in changes to the commissioners' portfolios? What are your thoughts on this?
The commissioners obviously are going to have to reflect the new current trends in politics and what will be expected from the next commission in the next 5 years. The college works a lot like any other government, which means that, of course, when you have a COVID pandemic, then the post of the health minister becomes a lot more important than, let's say, the tourism one, maybe. So you will see, I guess, the same thing in the next couple of months where portfolios would be reshaped to take into account new, not competencies, but new attention that's been put on several topics, such as health, such as defense because of the war in Ukraine. The farmers, of course, have also attracted a lot of attention on themselves and on what they expect from the cultural, common agricultural policy. Enlargement as well is said to take a lot of space because it does touch upon external relationships, but also cohesion and the budget and things like this. So I think there will definitely be shifts. Now, for the defense commissioner, we talk a lot about it. The question is really, what would they do? This has not been really said out loud yet. It sounds a lot like a campaign move you hear a lot around Brussels, but what would it change at the very end of it is very unclear because they would have to focus on defense industry, for example, and that policy, that industrial policy. However, there is one big file that is being negotiated at the moment, but whether that does require a full person to take on that job is a very different question.
I know that we like speculating a little bit, and in a previous episode with our very own Max Griera, who followed Nicolas Schmit in his campaign, Max mentioned that it would make a lot of sense for Schmit to remain in the commissioner's role, and we will see about that, but could this apply to the other commissioners as well?
There's a lot of attention put on the current Green Commissioner, which is Hopke Hoekstra, the Dutch, because he's quite new to the scene. So it would be interesting to see what happens to him and what the new Dutch government will want, because we're expecting a new Dutch government in the next few weeks, if not this week. So that would be interesting to keep an eye on him. There's the French Commissioner as well, Thierry Breton, who's attracted a lot of attention by working on the COVID vaccines, about the defense portfolio, defense industry, and single market and everything related to social media platforms and how they do content moderation. So he would probably also want to stay. I think there are big names like this. Some others are definitely expected to leave, like Johannes Hahn, for example, the Austrian, he's leaving. The Belgian, Didier Reynders, has said he's leaving. So big names are definitely maybe out of the door. So it would be interesting to see what governments would want to keep whom in the post.
Now, Thierry Breton, France's commissioner, is seen as having a strong chance of being reappointed, considering he is Emmanuel Macron's right arm. So would he be an option, or could there be any surprises, especially with the far right expected to gain a significant numbers of seats?
From Macron, I don't think you can expect him to appoint anyone else but someone he really trusts to the post. Whether that would be Breton or not is still to be decided. Macron likes to keep his cards very close to his chest and not reveal much until the last minute. Last time, he presented someone first, who was Sylvie Goulard, who got rejected by the parliament because she was allegedly involved in some dark matter and scandal. So maybe he will propose someone else. Maybe it will be Breton again. There has been talks about, he's often called the vice prime minister or vice president, Bruno Le Maire, who's currently minister for economics and also all things important and strategic. So he could be, for example, sent to Brussels as a good ally of Macron. It will also ultimately depend a lot on what portfolio the French wants to have and how also Renew, so Macron's party, does in the elections.
And what about Josep Borrell? Because he has been very vocal in the past year, especially in the context of the war in Gaza, and created lots of controversy in the high ranks. Will we see him coming back?
He said he's retiring, actually.
Oh.
So you won't see him back. I would expect him to take or to be interested in still a high office, maybe, because he has, like you say, a lot of experience and he doesn't mince his words. And you can definitely tell that over the past few months, he's been maybe a little more out there in giving his opinion.
Maybe this has to do with the fact that he has decided to retire
Definitely
anyway.
Could be, yeah. That tends to loosen people up.
And we talked about France and Spain, but there's also a lot of interest in who will be appointed from Italy, especially with the new government led by Giorgia Meloni. Several controversial names have been floated, including Francesco Lollobrigida and other people very close to Giorgia Meloni. There's a speculation about the possibility of Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani being appointed. Can you tell us a bit what is happening there?
I think it's a very good question. What will Meloni do? In general, I think it's a very good also example of how government can appoint someone or not. Because, for example, Tajani, he's not from the same party as she is. So she's from Fratelli d'Italia and he's from Forza Italia. Over the past few days, there's been a few issues with her travels in Italy and Forza Italia not providing her with what she would expect or what you would expect for like the right campaigning stage for her to do her rallies and meet people and campaign properly in Italy. And Forza Italia has not managed to do that. So that could actually count maybe against anyone coming from that party. However, we have to keep in mind, and that comes back to the first thing I was saying, is Meloni, just like any other government, is very likely to send someone that she believes can support Italy's take, even if the commissioners are not supposed to talk for their own country and they're supposed to be independent from it. At the end of the day, you do also send someone that you know will take into account the best interest of your country and your positions and all of this. And Meloni comes from a party which is sitting in the ECR group in the parliament, so that's the Conservatives, and they are going to get a lot more votes in this election. So she has a good reason to send someone from her own camp and not give it to someone else, because that would give someone from a political family a big position in the EU and in the College of Commissioners, and so actually have an impact on it.
And remaining two names, are there any particularly interesting personalities we should definitely keep an eye on, or
There has definitely been a few that have been mentioned around already. For example, the current Prime Minister of Belgium, Alexander De Croo, has said he's interested in a position. The Greek Prime Minister that we were talking about earlier, Mitsotakis, could maybe be commissioner, although that would maybe be a bit of a step down after being Prime Minister. The Austrian commissioner is quite expected because they would be replacing Johannes Hahn, who has very good aura in Brussels and is respected. He's in charge of budget at the moment, the EU budget, which is a big file. And we expect someone coming directly from Vienna, from the Europe Ministry, as the Europe Minister, actually. So that would be interesting. The Polish as well are expected to send, but again, it's not confirmed, their current defense minister, so Sikorski.
Already lots of names.
So what is interesting, again, I think, is that we're expecting a lot of big names to come to Brussels. And I think that's a good thing to note, because we often say, Brussels decides without us. The Commission does whatever it wants. There's no link to the governments and things like this. But when you send a very big name and someone who's actually important on a national level and whom you trust, and you send them to Brussels, you send them to sit at this college, and you send them to work on laws, basically, that will impact everyone, it shows actually how important the job is and how important it is to all those governments and all those leaders that then turn their back on Brussels and say that the Commission has decided without them. So I think that's interesting.
Thank you very much, Aurélie. I am Evi Kiorri, and this was Euractiv's Today in the EU podcast. Visit Euractiv to stay on top of the latest news, sign up for our podcast newsletter, and if you haven't subscribed or followed us yet, you can find us on all streaming platforms. Also, make sure to leave a review or a comment on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Your reviews help us a lot to spread the word about our work, and this episode was produced by Miriam Sáenz de Tejada, Nicoleta Yonta, and myself. Thank you for tuning in, and until tomorrow morning. As part of our commitment to accuracy, inclusion and transparency, Euractiv is part of the Trust Project.